Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time joining us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are welcoming a panel of distinguished guests to talk about the issue of spirituality, faith, and care. Welcome! Before we get started, I want to take a moment and have each of you briefly introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners, and I'll start with Laurette.
Hi, my name is Laurette Klier. I am the founder of Nana's Books. It is an adaptive series for people that are living in, older adults that are living in life review, palliative care, hospice, long-term care, and aging in place, but people that are living with cognitive change. And again, the books have a very spiritual bent, and that was why we put this conversation together today. And my background is in education, speech communications, and cognitive stimulation therapy, and essentially working with people to help them communicate through literacy environments, poetry, the arts. And I worked as a grant writer for many years, but through my experience with my mother-in-law who had Lewy body dementia, I started to create these little books, and here we are. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure to see you, Laurette. Next, we'll go to Elisa.
Hey, my name is Elisa Bosley. I'm a licensed non-denominational chaplain with special ministry to older adults with Alzheimer's and other dementias. So I have decades of worship experience and Bible study leading experience, which I put together with dementia care. And I'm also a professional writer and editor. So my goal was to create free resources online. So at spiritualeldercare.com. All these resources for other people to do spiritual care for older adults, especially those with dementia. So, church services and Bible study, discussion guides, and especially hymns that are sing-along hymns everything is developed for people with dementia and their particular needs. So that's what I do.
Thank you. It's important ministry. Next, we'll go to Paula.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Paula Muller. I'm the founder of CareLink 360. And what we have developed is a product, is a platform for older adults to stay in touch and in communication, engage with their loved ones in a very, very simple way. We offer a dedicated device that looks like a picture frame, and it allows them to have activities, but most importantly, stay connected with their families through video chat, photos, and also have access to meaningful content. And that's what spirituality is so important, that they have access to their hymns, to their songs, to their prayers, independent of the language where they are. So we have been talking with Laurette so much about the importance of spirituality, independent of the religion. Really is about this transcendent. What do we do when we're processing our life? Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Paula. And finally, we'll go to Christine.
Thank you for having me, Lance. So my name is Christine Droney. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I have a small private practice here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I kind of work in the circle of life, as I call it. I have a postmaster's in palliative medicine. I work with women with perinatal mental health. I work in all kinds of different transitions that we go through, and also anxiety, depression, mental health. But really, it is human conversations, and that is what I do. I started out in nursing, and through my own growth, I ended up in a clinical psychotherapy practice. So that is my story.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being here as well. Yeah, I wanted to open up this conversation on care and spirituality and faith, and go through and ask each of you, and I'll start with Laurette. What has been your walk, Laurette, as a care partner to a loved one, and are you still currently in that role, and who is it with?
I mean, most profoundly, I would say with my mother-in-law who passed during COVID. She was living with Lewy body dementia in Massachusetts, and we're here in Connecticut. And that kind of steered me in this direction. But prior to that, when I was 14, I started working in a coronary care center, St. Francis Hospital on Long Island. And at that time, I was in a geriatric step-down unit. And, everyone was sundowning in the afternoon when I would get there after school. And I had no idea what that was, but nor did the medical staff. So what would happen was there was a man that would come in and read the poetry of Aetna St. Vincent Millay to his wife. And the whole unit would just take a breath and just really, lean into the moment and kind of slow it all down. And I never thought about that again, really, until, I taught for many years, was a grant writer, and I was always resourcing underserved populations, but with programs and materials and things like that, and, field trips, you name it. I never thought I'd be involved in this work. And it is the caring element and the caregiving element that caused me to be at the bedside of one person or another in my life and to develop these books and this work. So honestly, just a real a bird walk into something that I just feel so fortunate to be doing.
And are you still caring for anybody currently?
At the moment, no. I've raised twins. My husband and I, and my son Ford too. So 3 kids. Kind of single-handedly. My husband runs an out-of-state business, so definitely supported families, other families, and really grew up in a large Irish, Italian, Catholic family where there was caregiving, of one form or another my entire life. And I wouldn't say I was parentified, but we definitely had younger siblings, and we helped raise them. So caregiving has been a thread through all of my days.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Elise?
I love what you said, Lori, about I never expected to be doing this work. It very organically evolves, right? So it started, I think the dementia care part started for me with my father-in-law who had Alzheimer's, and just loved being with him and really enjoyed interacting in all ways with him. After he passed, I started volunteering at a memory care residence where he lived the last few weeks of his life, and just found that I really enjoyed that population. So I am now, I have been for years now, the chaplain at that memory care community. And so caring for people in that way. I don't have a family member that I'm caring for directly, but caring for people in that memory care home. And then virtually through, again, COVID, I was just doing in-person stuff. And then COVID, completely blew that up. And that's where the online versions came into being. So doing a lot of that still too.
Wonderful. How did you find that the spirituality, from those experiences led you into you becoming a chaplain? Did that play a major role?
Yes. So again, I had decades and decades of experience as a worship leader in church settings, right? I'm a Christian, so it was in the Christian setting. But when I went into the memory care home, I was really lucky because that particular home had a value for spiritual care. I did not realize at the time that is rare. And I was, just as a volunteer, I was bringing people to this church service that they held. And of course, with my background, I just was like, oh my goodness, it's putting it together. It's putting everything I love together. This care for people with dementia, very specific, and worship and prayers and poetry and all the things, like Paula said, that meet that sort of intangible spiritual need, regardless of what the faith is. Right. So it just was a huge light bulb moment for me. And so when the person who was doing those church services moved on, the staff knew my background. And so they asked me if I'd like to step into that role. And I jumped at it because, again, it just kind of combined everything that I love doing.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. Paula, how about you?
So my story is a little bit like Laurette, that growing up I'm originally from Chile, so growing up in Chile in a Catholic and family, the thread of caring was always there. My grandmother, my mother, my family, you look everywhere, and in the Latino families, caring is not a second thought. You just take care of your loved ones. So that thread is all along. Now, moving into the US, my reality become a long distance caregiver, trying to support my mother, my grandmother from afar. And that was also the motivation for my company. Can we bridge that gap through technology? That is what I know from my professional background. So caregiving, it has been always with me. And right now I'm sort of supporting my parents and my in-laws from afar. So that's my experience with caregiving, and spirituality in our families is very strong. But I see it like Elisa mentioned, it's not a particular religion one or another. It's just how we process our life through spirituality as we age, and that's what motivates me. That's what really I think very valuable, and it's not, we don't talk too much about it. So that's what I'm so happy when Laurette suggested this topic, because I think it's important.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you being here today. Next, Christine, we'll go to you.
So for me, I think I've had an arc of growth with spirituality, that spirituality is different than religion for me. I've learned that. So I immigrated here from Belfast in 1976. So it was the height of the Troubles. That was what they called the war. So I, like many of you, have that intergenerational family living, and we took care of each other. And religion, the Catholicism, was very important in our family. So for me, it has been an arc of growth over time to kind of move the religion piece to the spiritual piece. And even in my work, how spirituality is, and clinical studies show, it can be a protective factor, right? Against illness, mental illness, all kinds of illnesses. So really for me, it has been, no expectations, and really having a faith formation for me, whatever that is, and walking whatever the walk is with people that I encounter. So, I'm a caregiver presently to two parents. My mother has dementia, and my father has many different chronic illnesses, and he is a caregiver to my mother, so I'm supporting him. And I have 3 adult children, 2 of which were born with a autosomal bleeding disorder. And so I have been kind of a reluctant expert. I've had to learn how to be a caregiver. I've had to learn about different disease processes. And so for me, the arc of growth with my faith and spirituality has just been ongoing as a result of my life, which then goes into my clinical practice.
I want to follow up on that, Christine, briefly. When you say that goes into your clinical practice as a social worker, do you have any examples that you could share with how you use that in practice?
Sure. So I am certified. I'm a certified thanatologist, which is, again, extensive study of loss, death, grief, loss, everything. So I work in that field. I work in chronic illness. I work in, any kind of what I call brain health issue versus mental health issue. So I really do look at the whole person. And when I am meeting someone, greeting someone, I'm really trying to figure out, like, do they have a spiritual connection? What has been their experiences? And that does come into our clinical practice, because it becomes a human conversation, because developmentally that's really important, and that how we develop as a young person impacts who we are today. And faith or spirituality, or the lack of it comes out. And so for me, it does come into clinical practice. People have asked me to pray with them. I've listened to folks pray. We have brought different, during my hospice time, when folks are dying, different belief systems, you need to be competent in those, but you also need to support that person. And so for me, I have seen this arc of growth, both personally and professionally. And so spirituality, faith, religion, very different, but yet very much the same, and very important, because we're all people.
Absolutely. I want to go to the next question for you. And we'll start with Laurette. Laurette, do you have a tradition that you have practiced, or how has it informed the work that you are doing, say, with that Nana's books? And why do you feel like spirituality should be something that's vital and that is supported for people that are giving and receiving the care?
So I was raised, as I said, Catholic, growing up in New York. Very, I'd say, a casual Catholic in the way that, we weren't churchgoers. And then and I always was I think I was a very Christian child. I really was about supporting other people. And I loved my elders. My grandmother was a widow my entire life, and she lived in the next town. So she was with us, and she was a very devout Catholic, and she went to mass every day. But part of her church and part of her institution and her, she drove a groove down Northern Boulevard between her house and our house and St. Aloysius, the church. So I think just by being at her knee, I really became very cognizant of lonely people and people that needed more support, and people that, perhaps were othered by, so I got involved in special education in my community and worked at the Human Resources Center in Albertson. And I just was always involved in something that nourished my spirit, I think. And then as I grew, I went to college, to a Jesuit university, Boston College. I also got I did my master's there as well. And a lot of it was about theology and philosophy, and learning everything about epigenetics and what makes someone, at their core, on a cellular level, even who they are, and to try to divine the divine within, and say, when people say to one another, in, let's say, yoga, namaste, what they're saying is that the divine in me recognizes the divine in you. And I think that this type of caring, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about, not only do I see you, and I see you in your, let's say, at this moment, your brokenness, let's say with Christine, with people that are psychologically and, emotionally, they're suffering, or people that are physically suffering and need that nurturing, and they need that, my father always talks about, like, Dad, what can I get you for Christmas? He just says a kind word, So I think so many people out there need a kind word. And so I think in college, my undergraduate program, I worked with a Dominican monk named Sebastian Moore, and he taught a course called Images of Religious Self-Understanding. And he thought, can you get any more esoteric than that? I mean, what am I going to do with this after I graduate? But every single thing I do is about these images and this verse and this poetry that are the manifestations, the visual representation of faith. And I imbue that and infuse that in everything I do. So I think that kind of is the roundabout way that, again, I kind of started as a caring person and started as a volunteer and like a good doobie. I think I wanted to get away from chaos and wanted to be around people. Not that was my life, but that I wanted to be around quiet and stillness and people that were making these peaceful moments. And I think that has been a thread, and that's kind of carried through to today. And that's what I hope to, I was looking at a Mary Oliver quote this morning, and she says, tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. So what do you plan to do with it? What did I do with it? And how am I doing it? And I say to myself that every day. I think, how am I doing? How am I doing in this world, and what am I giving? And I think that's something that I work on every day.
That's wonderful. How about you, Elise?
It's interesting. I think we all have some Catholic background in there somewhere. So Paula, like you, my mother is Latina, so we grew up Catholic. Became much more personal for me later. I call myself a Jesus follower. And we've also alluded to the fact, I know Christine and Lori have both said this difference between religion and spirituality, right? So religion, I would say, is a specific faith expression, right? Whether that's Catholic or Protestant or Buddhist or Jewish or whatever it is. And spirituality is more universal. I would say that's kind of the innate reality for every single human being. So I feel like a lot of what I do combines those, right? So I very unapologetically provide very familiar forms for religion, right? For mostly a Christian audience in my case. The Lord's Prayer or certain songs that are specific, because those are so effective. There's even research on this, that they have a really high procedural element, which for people with memory issues is huge, right? They remember the forms in their long-term memory, and a really high emotional payoff. It has both of them. So, you could do bingo and that has a high procedural value because it's very familiar how to do it, but it doesn't have that high emotional payoff, whereas these religious and or spiritual activities do. So providing those forms just became, for me, such an important element to meet the needs of people. But again, it's like, well, we got to bring in not just a specific religion, but forms and questions, and I know all of us will agree with this, interactive elements that will help people with that expression, like Lori was talking about, expression of who they are and what matters to them. So, whether or not a person comes from my particular background is not the point, right? That if they come from a different background and I feel like, well, I can't meet that particular need religiously, I need to find somebody who can, whether that's an imam or a rabbi or whoever. So again, bringing in those forms and universals, like, for example, Christine, I'm sure you'd know this too, asking questions like, what brings you joy?
Yeah.
That's a spiritual question, right? Or what causes you fear? Or what do you hope for? Those are all spiritual questions that apply across the board. So I don't know if I answered your question, Lance, but there it is.
That's great. I'm going to come back to you a little bit later with a follow-up to that, but next we'll go to Paula.
Thank you. I think I fully agree with Elisa. Is one aspect is the religious aspect, right? That it has a very distinct visual elements and manifestation. But I think we all as human connect at the spiritual level. That is something that we all understand, that it has a meaning that is hard to describe, but we can feel it and we can acknowledge it. And I think especially as we move into the journey of dementia, that becomes that surface, and we can explore and communicate with our loved ones living with dementia at that element, at that surface, at that level of communication, which is so meaningful, and it's important, because finding that level of communication allows the care partners, the caregivers, support their loved ones at the moment when they cannot express themselves verbally with the words that we all understand, and it gives them hope. And I think that is one important aspect of what we're discussing today, and giving those elements up, basically enabling those opportunities of identifying those elements of communication at the spiritual level is so important, and that is something that we try to enable through the products that we develop, because I realize it's so important, and it's especially my work as a volunteer support for many support groups of caregivers for people living with dementia. This has been a journey for me, understanding the elements that there is hope in dementia. And I think talking about spirituality and giving them the means to be open to identify those channels of communication is so important. So I'm very pleased that we're talking about that today.
Thank you, Paula. How about for you, Christine?
So, I think we're right. When we're born, everyone is hardwired for spirituality. And then you have epigenetics, you have environment, temperament, all throughout the lifespan changes us. But, when you think of spirituality, many things are impermanent. And for most people, spirituality is something that you will find. Most people will find that. So, even with my mother, so I look at person and environment. It's a theory, but for my mother, who, I see her as sometimes treated as a potted plant, right? So how do I, as her daughter, caregiver, someone that has knowledge, educate my family and not get pushback? And, say, like, for my mom, who is a devout Catholic, so the meditative process of saying the rosary or saying it with her, or she may not remember all of the prayers, or in order, or on the phone, actually singing a song that, for my mother is important and brings her back to a time that she feels good and comfortable. But for me, actually, professionally, I think there's probably no more profound opportunity that I ever have had than starting a No One Dies Alone program. And for me, that was, educating a group of volunteers from all across the lifespan and professionally, who would sit with the dying when they were in hospital systems or nursing homes and they had no one for whatever reason. And you would see at the end of life the importance of something, and so I really saw that we are impermanent, but that spiritual piece is so permanent. So I think that we all bring something to each other. And again, it goes back to those human connections, and, whatever your faith journey is, or, whomever you're caring for, or caring for yourself. So it's so important to kind of, for yourself, process, where are you right now in your spiritual journey? Do you have one? How do you take care of yourself when you're caring for someone else?
Right. I want to go back to Elise real briefly. And Elise, when you're with a family, and you'd mentioned hospice, and you're called in to counsel them and comfort them, and maybe there's a question about the person's salvation, and the person has dementia. How do you rectify that? They're making that proclamation, free and voluntarily, but if they're in the late stages of dementia and a family has a concern about whether that really would, quote unquote, count because of their cognitive ability or lack thereof, what's your answer to that family?
Oh, wow, that's an interesting question. I mean, it comes up often in terms of, why are we doing this spiritual care? They're not going to remember it anyway, right? They're how do I know that my mom still has her faith? She doesn't remember my name, let alone God's name or whoever. And I sort of have to feel like, what I try to say is, there are things about the spiritual world that are mysteries, always have been, always will be. What we cannot see does not mean things are not real and are not happening, right? We are finite human beings. We have finite vision. We have finite language ability, but God does not. So in my worldview, and again, I have to be very sensitive to whatever the family's background is, right? I can't just sort of impose my own, belief system. But I can say, from my perspective, God is much bigger than dementia. I have seen countless examples of miracles happening, people with advanced dementia saying or doing things that their family says, I haven't heard her say that or do that in years, right? So don't assume that God is not active and invested and loving and blessing the person with dementia, despite what we can see or perceive. I have seen it. I've seen miracles. I would consider them miracles over and over. So, it comes up when, for instance, with communion too. It's just another example. Like, well, oh gosh, can we offer communion? Because do they really understand what it means? Like, well, that's kind of not the frame of reference we're using right now, right? What cognitively makes sense to us. We need to enter into the person's world that we're trying to love well. And that's what God is doing. So that's what we need to do as well. Yeah. Again, I hope that answered your question.
It does. It does. I have 3 children, 11, 9, and 7-year-old. The 2 oldest are my daughters and the youngest is my son. And when our oldest decided to get baptized, she had a great, reason and logic behind it, because you want to make sure that they're not just picking something because they saw someone else do it and, that sort of thing. But we didn't want to discourage it either. And, she had posed a question to me that just blew my mind. And it's kind of similar to what your answer was, God is much bigger and there's some things that defies logic. But she says, Dad, if we're all supposed to go to heaven after, we believe in Jesus and we get baptized, and we're not supposed to be sad or want for anything. But if we get there and one of our family members or friends doesn't make it to heaven, how could that be true? And I'm like, go talk to your mother. I don't have the answer for that one. But I wanted to pose this question to the four of you. And this is something that, is very personal for me. I believe the church, regardless of denomination or belief, could play such a more vital, crucial, impactful role in, these 60 plus million unpaid family caregivers and the countless of families dealing with, PTSD or children born with, disability or illness. And they do play somewhat of a role, but I feel like there's a much bigger role that they could help to fill. I want to hear your guys' opinions in, am I wrong on that? Is it playing a bigger role in maybe our area? We're just not seeing it. Or if someone asked you, in your communities, which church would you go to if you're dealing with a loved one with any sort of illness or disease? Who's going to have the best support for me, not only spiritually, but also saying, hey, we have a ministry where, these ladies or men or whoever, they'll come and sit with your mom or your dad or your wife, once a week just for a couple of hours so that you can go take care of your needs. Do you feel like that exists? What is your thoughts on the church and, the role in supporting caregivers and just care in general? And we'll start with Laurette.
I think that, we're all, we discount the fact that the people that are living in care, let's say, when you have a young child who has, let's say, a birth injury or a terminal illness, or all the way to, let's say, a parent living with dementia, we're all grieving at a certain level. And people are not just grieving, but, you're grieving the life that the child may have had, or what you had in mind, or when the person is older, you're thinking about transcendence and what was their legacy and all these different things. So I think that, of course, we all need faith and spirituality to parse that and to make sense of all of that, and to, understand, the trajectory of our lives and those we were about to leave behind and so forth. So I think that we've got a very long way to go as far as, disseminating the information about, the importance of a spiritual life. And I think that, the silver lining, if there is one, of COVID is this telehealth and this teleconnection, where we can reach out across the world and across the country and across town, and to talk with other people that, let's say, maybe share our faith tradition or maybe don't, and where we can have these kinds of connected conversations that are deeply meaningful and from the comfort of our own homes, because caregivers don't have that access to, just shooting around, and traveling and so forth, the neighborhood or, further afield. So I think that the possibilities are endless. And I think that these types of concerned, connected, caring professionals in this devotional space, the mental health space, the social work, clinicians, I definitely think that more effort needs to be placed, because I do think a lot of pharma and a lot of these brickbat interventions would not be necessary if we could have these types of human interactions daily or weekly. They're so nurturing. They nourish our souls. And I think that these types of things at a very grassroots level, I think, could really take off and benefit people. And now they can connect globally and can work together and to make these kinds of revelations and realize that, they're not in fact alone, and that, there is a higher power that is, definitely in our lives and can guide us and can give us that purpose and, give structure and strength to our day.
Yeah. How about you, Paula?
So I think that the spirituality aspect and acknowledging has different different connotations. So if we think about uh, and I see it both ways for the care recipient and the caregiver, in the sense that on one hand, having that connection with a faith base that gives you support, and faith based organization are very strong on the support to the community, where they can find solace, they can find that they can be heard and they can find help. But also I see the spirituality in a way that gives you pause and gives you the direction of how to move forward with your life and how to process the difficulties. And also I see the spirituality in the level of finding that connection, even when the words or the actions are difficult, especially if you're thinking about people living with dementia, if you can find that commonality at that spiritual level. Because what happened in my experience talking with caregivers and seeing people living with dementia, the intuitive thinking, the emotional aspect is really what it remains, even when the words are not there, even when the understanding is not there. Like Elisa was saying, it's not the point if they are going to follow the logic of what the meaning of this symbol is how they feel. And how they feel is something that transcends more than the moment where they are experiencing that. So I see talking about spirituality and acknowledging the value of that is so important, because it's give us another element of communication and connection that we're not taking advantage of. And it's so simple, it's there, and it transcends language, it transcends knowledge, it transcends our understanding of the logic. And the other point that I wanted to make that I believe is so important is that spirituality gives, especially older adults in the process of aging, the means to elaborate and basically process their life. I believe we are all we all evolve in our life, and we go through different processes and stages. But I think older adults are also maturing in when they are reaching older age. They want to process their life and see what they have done all those years and be at ease with themselves. And I think that using spirituality is a mechanism that helps them be at ease and reach older age at the best way that they can be. So acknowledge that, I think, is very important.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with you, Paula, full-heartedly. How about for you, Christine?
So I think on a macro level, we have a real opportunity with a national movement, especially post-COVID and through telehealth, through Zoom, through everything, to national town halls, because people like to speak to other humans. They love to speak to one another. They love to have community and share stories. So I would love to see national town halls all over the country, not about politics, about real issues like this that are exciting. And also for some people, they lose their faith, they lose their sense of spirit, things happen and they're done, they lose it. And so I would love to see where we also have some corporate social responsibility, where we tap into some of the big pharma or some of the large companies and say, hey, would you sponsor a town hall and just have a panel just talking and engaging in questions with folks, and just really those human connections to further the conversation, because there's an epidemic of loneliness. I mean, the data is out there, the studies show it. And just these types of conversations would be amazing for let's go to the 16-year-old, to the 90-year-old. They're all going through the same issues, just differently. They're all life reviewing in different ways and developmentally. But I think that we have an opportunity for a national movement to have this conversation. That's what I would love to see. I would love to see that.
Would you say that you're pleased with the resources and support in your local community from the church body?
So I live in a community that's, I would say, very religious, perhaps not spiritual, but religious. I do not believe there's enough of it anywhere, and I think we can do better. Here we probably do better in terms of religion. Spirituality, no. I think there's a lot of opportunity. We have like Laurette said, we have a long way to go, and I would love to see us push this forward, because I think, our world needs it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Elise.
I'd love to second that. And to answer your original question, Lance, no, churches are not doing enough.
Yeah.
That's just the bottom line. It's, the elderly and people with dementia, there simply isn't enough education, destigmatizing, resources, because, well, for lots of different reasons. But yeah, I think we could do a lot better and need to do a lot better.
Right. I know we're coming close to the end here. And again, thank all of you for your time today and adding your voice to this conversation. My biggest question, though, is we all know the significance, the benefit, and, really the positiveness that care and the church can bring. But I think all of you agreed that churches aren't doing enough. Does anybody have any insight or opinions as to why? And before you answer, I look at it, I've had 3 children, each one of our children, the church was there 110%. We were very grateful, appreciative, meals and anything we needed. With a death of, my father, my wife's father, same thing. Church was there before and after. And, baptisms and baby dedications, church was there. But those are all short-term things, right? After the funeral's over, those, maybe month or two, people go back, unfortunately, to their daily lives, unless it's their loved one that had passed. The child, you get adjusted, you get them home, you kind of get settled, get back into the routine. The church kind of goes on. With caregiving, it's not necessarily short-term. That's ongoing. So I don't know, is that the reason behind it? Is it because it's not really something that's traditionally been practiced or done in church? I don't know the answer, so I'm hoping maybe one of you may have some opinions or insights, as to why that might be. We'll start with Laurette.
Lance, I think that's a really tough one. There is fragmentation in general. Families have spread apart. The nuclear family isn't the way it was. And, certainly with the constellation of elders, let's say, living under one roof. So that care component, which was so organic and so nurturing and so important for people, that's no longer in place. And I think that to our detriment, as a society, and it's not just in America, that is changing globally. I wish I had a good answer. I feel like if we're to focus on the micro level and the people that we can work with in our community, and we can just on, in the most, let's say Christian or whatever your faith tradition is, if the neighbor that you don't know all that well is in the middle of something dark and deep, and you don't, again, to bring over a pot of soup or something, again, I think that to start with the individual and to create peace and create a sense of value for people, again, on the smallest level, and just a mitzvah, a kind deed, mowing someone's lawn or sending your teenage kids over to pull the weeds. I think it happens on the micro level, and I think that that's the place we need to start. And as far as the larger picture, Lance, I wish I had a better answer, but I think these kinds of things, because there's so many like-minded people out there, we just need to learn how to mobilize and how to reach one another.
Absolutely.
That's my answer.
How about you, Christine? Do you have any insights or thoughts on that?
Well, I think, churches are limited in resources in terms of people, just their human capital to work at churches, So if you're looking for your church for a long-term solution, it's going to be hard. There's limited staff. They're also dealing with life stressors. I do absolutely believe in I know our family walking the talk and showing, and our children as adults continue to do that. So in your own 4 walls, it starts there. But I do think that, most churches are hindered by resources. And so, your social media and things like that with our younger people, where it was normal to let's just go to church together, let's have community together. So I do think that is that's a barrier, that the resources, churches don't always have the human capital to do the work. So that's where all of us have to be more involved within our faith communities.
Right. Well, and that's what I was going to say. I know, like for us, we facilitate dementia seminars and caregiver support groups at our church. It's a non-paid. We're not looking to get paid. We're volunteering because we're trying to help support the community and our families. I just feel like, that's something that could at least be looked at, doing something in a volunteer-based approach where, it's not costing any sort of, revenue or income to the church or any expense. Just something to let, these communities and these families know, the church is also here for you, just to give them, that extra support, even if it's a phone call. Just, hey, I was just thinking about you, how are you doing this week? We're here, give us a call. We know what you're going through, that sort of thing. It could be a very, very grassroots approach. Paula, do you have any insights to that?
Yes, I fully agree with Christine that the churches have limited resources. But I'm going to continue with the discussion that Laurette presented of working at your local level. I think there are local organizations, your school, your high school, your senior centers. I mean, I have the very good experience with my own local senior center in my town, where we have been doing outreach program and trying, like you, Lance, trying to educate our community on dementia and Alzheimer's, the warning signs, and just starting from there at the local level, trying to reach out the community, the different constituents, the different people that belong to your community. And
Yeah.
I think the efforts, the goodwill is there. It's just the acknowledgement that the resources are limited, but doing volunteering work at your local level and trying to build those connections, because like Laurette said, the dynamics of our families nowadays is completely different like it was 30, 40 years ago, where we were all closer together, living close. I mean, grandma and grandpa were close. Now you graduate from high school, you go to another town that is very far away, or even to another country, and then the families get spread, and then everyone is trying to build their profession, their career, their families, and it's a little bit of a struggle to reach out. But if we make the effort at our local level, I think the goodwill is there, and I think people have stepped up to the plate. Even before COVID, I mean, the people are good, and they want to help each other.
Absolutely. That's well said, Paula. How about you, Elise?
I have a lot to say on this subject. First of all, I totally agree with, and Jesus said that, right? Give a cup of cold water. Give a meal, right? Those little things are where we start, and they matter. They matter eternally. At the same time, I feel like we are failing our families and our elders by not devoting resources to care. And I defy anyone to say, well, this isn't going to affect me, or, it's going to affect everybody, because everybody gets old or knows somebody who gets old. They're going to end up either with dementia or with some kind of impairment. They're going to be caring for somebody or being cared for. It's everyone. But I get very frustrated because I feel like there's an attitude in churches, or there can be an attitude in churches. I get it. The resources are stretched, but there's always resources for what matters. And it's not that I'm saying don't support youth ministry. I know that's important, but there is a blessing that we are missing as the church. Yep. To not care for our caregivers and our elders, and to make those a priority, not based on return on investment. There's not going to be a return on investment, right? Those people are going to die. They're not going to be adding to your coffers. They're not going to be, growing your church membership. They're not. But that's not the point, right?
Right.
That's not the point. The point is we need to be providing these resources and care. And I do think there are resources available. There's training, you know, what you're doing, Lance, obviously, like support groups, but the church needs to get behind that, at least to support, you
Yeah.
know, to say, yeah, we're going to make time and space for this.
Yeah. Which
And, you know,
they did.
yeah, which
You
is awesome. And churches can do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Before we close, I want to ask each of you, and if you don't, that's okay. I don't want to put you on the spot. Does anybody have a verse that they kind of live by that they would like to share?
Yes.
Go ahead, Elise.
The 2 Corinthians 4, though our outer selves are wasting away, our inner selves are being renewed day by day. And I think that's where the again, that light bulb moment. Yeah, we all will, we all are. Our bodies are temporary dwelling places, but the spirit inside, our inner selves, are being renewed day by day, right? Those things, that inner spirit does not disappear. It does not decay. It is as new and young as the day we were born.
Right.
And that is what we, for me, that's what I need to focus on. That it doesn't matter what I'm seeing in terms of the death and decay, although that makes our culture very uncomfortable. But to focus on the value and the reality and the beauty and the blessing of that inner spirit, and to know that that's a place we can constantly access and reach.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyone else?
Again, I look at the dignity and worth of a person, and do unto others as we would want, you know, do unto us. It's just very simple for me, and just treat everybody as if we would want to be treated.
Absolutely. Well, I'll share two that I kind of try to live by. The first is Luke 12:48. If anybody knows that, to whom much is given, much will be required. Then the other one is Matthew 25:35 and 36. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. Neither one of those things cost us anything, you know, and I think it just goes back to, you know, what you were saying, Christine. It's, you know, do unto others as you would want done unto you. And Elise kind of summarized it. Sometimes if it's not affecting you, you don't think about it, right? But everybody will be affected by this one way or the other. The famous Rosalind Carter quote about caregivers: you either are one, were one, will be one, or need one. And, you know, I just think the church has such a pivotal role that they could be helping to fill, and it doesn't have to be costly or expensive. You know, I know several churches in our state where, you know, they just get volunteers, you know, they have a care ministry, or, you know, one of the churches, there's a doctor and, you know, he gets volunteers and trains them, and then they go to Central America and, you know, do all kinds of wonderful work. But there's a lot of wonderful work we could do here too, you know, and I think for me, I always believe when you start at home, then you work your way out. But, you know, there's reasons and logics for both ways. But I want to close out by asking each of you if you have any plans for anything next in your work, or do you sense a shift in what we can do to further spiritual care? And we'll start with Paula.
Thank you. I think we're starting with the conversation today to acknowledge that the spirituality is an aspect that we shouldn't forget, and we should actually embrace and elevate. And that will give us the opportunity to find new elements of communication with all of us, and a new hope from a perspective of the caregiver and the care recipient in any condition, chronic condition, dementia, you name it. So I think spirituality is a new channel of hope.
All right. Thank you, Paula, and thank you for being here today. Laurette.
I feel the same. I feel that to build in that ritual, that quiet peace, that moment in the day where you can reconnect with your soul, your spirit, and to help people that are struggling to do that. I think, again, on the smallest level and on a grander level, I think that's our life work. And regarding a quote, I was thinking about, I go back to Mary Oliver, who says, sometimes I need only to stand where I am to be blessed. And there are people that are in place, and they'll be in place, and they'll be, again, they're in life review, and they are closing out their days. And I think that when we think about the worth of an individual, we're all worthy. We're all worthy of love and worthy of joy and worthy of connection. And that doesn't stop with a dementia diagnosis or with a chronic illness and being shut away. I think we need to think long and hard about how we're tending the souls of our fellow human beings.
Absolutely. Thank you, Laurette. How about you, Christine?
So I have been a lifelong volunteer. It's just part of who I am. So I actually starting with our local libraries and our librarians to host a book club 4 times a year, and we'll look at a book that would be relevant to caregivers and have them have a respite hour and community. And so that's where we're starting. And I've enlisted a couple of therapists pro bono. We're just facilitating it and just listening. So that's how micro I'm starting here in Lidditz, which is great, right? That there's a place you can go and have respite.
Absolutely. And every tree starts as a seed, right?
Yep.
And we'll close with you, Elise.
Well, I think it is finding those resources that meet the needs that are on your own heart, that all of us have, and we've all alluded to this, right? The dignity of every single human being. And how can we honor that? How can we encourage that? How can we grow that? Completely regardless of where that person is at in their life journey and even in their spiritual journey. So, there are resources out there. I've got resources, Paula, Christine, Lori, all of us have those resources. They do exist to find ways to say, okay, this is my heart for these people in need, and these people have dignity and worth, and I want to grow that and meet that. And to connect with those and to not be afraid, to just step out and do it. I'm constantly kind of encouraging people, just show up. Right. Just show up. I can't remember who said this earlier. I think it was Christine, just pray with someone. Just share a Bible verse with somebody. Just share a Mary Oliver poem with somebody. Whatever is going to meet that person's heart need in a spiritual place is going to reap enormous benefit and blessing to both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank all 4 of you for joining us today for this discussion on faith, spirituality, and care. And I wish you all the best, and hopefully we'll be seeing you again soon and keeping in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lance.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to our distinguished guest for joining us today on the issue of spirituality, faith, and care. We look forward to seeing you next time here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.